The NES is often remembered for being the console that kick-started the modern video game industry. It's a cultural icon that, in many ways, represents the history of video games. And how could it not? The impact it had was driven, in many ways, by the games in its library. And such an incredible library at that. Super Mario Bros., Castlevania, Metroid, Zelda, Punch-Out! And then, the closer you get to the release of the Super Nintendo, the less, remembered the list gets. There was just a sea of games releasing after about 1987, and without marketing, a lot of them fell to the wayside. Which is a shame, because many of the most impressive games on a console tend to come out in the back half of its life. Nowadays, the hardware difference between generations has gotten slimmer and slimmer, so a lot of games will release cross-gen, but back then, no way. You're not getting Castlevania on Super Nintendo unless it's a full-on remake. Thus, the launch of the SNES in 1990 left a lot of developers in an interesting situation. It was the new hotness, pulling most, if not all, of the buzz in magazines. Hell, Final Fantasies 2 and 3 didn't even come out in the US because Square figured 1989 was too late to bring them over when FF4 was coming out soon on the Super Nintendo, thus the whole weird naming thing that happened. Who in their right minds would keep developing games for the old and busted NES? I want to take you on a journey to an era long forgotten by many. We're going to go beyond the Super Nintendo, beyond 1990. One of the coolest things about games from this time frame is that developers knew how to push the NES hardware to its limits. You can actually see a progression in the Mega Man titles. Here's 1, here's 3, and here's 6! Look at that sunset! There was nothing this nice in 1985. In the same vein, let's take a look at Little Samson, developed by Taito in 1992. Little Samson is best known today for being one of the most expensive NES titles ever, going at... yeah, that's way too much. Look, the game is good, it's not that good. But speaking of... Little Samson is a side-scrolling action game with a neat twist. The game begins with a king ordering his soldiers out of the castle to confront the evil Prince of Darkness. After they're obliterated by a wizard, the king decides to send out birds to seek 4 heroes who each hold majestic bells of power. Each of them respond to the call, and in a neat stroke, they each get individual levels to introduce their unique abilities. The player can choose them in any order, but unfortunately, afterwards, the game has a completely linear progression. I think it would have been neat to develop this idea out further, like Castlevania 3 with branching pathways and everything. I just checked a walkthrough, and apparently there are 2 alternate boss fights you can go to, I just never found them. In any event, the intro levels do a really good job teaching the player about the different characters. Samson can shoot straight, climb walls, and has a really over-animated jump. Kirika, the dragon, can fly and shoot these curved flames that she can charge up. Gam, the rock lord, is slow, can't duck, and has a short-range attack, but he can punch in 4 directions and does huge damage. Also, he can walk on spikes. And finally, KO, the enchanted beast, can place bombs, climb up walls, run on water, is generally the fastest and the shortest, meaning he can just stand under some projectiles. The player can choose to freely switch between any of these 4 characters during gameplay. The level design, for the most part, allows you to tackle obstacles in a lot of different ways, while also rewarding smart use of certain characters. Take the first level after the intros, for instance. It definitely throws a little too much at you, but take a look at this stretch here. The flower enemy in the middle platform is placed just in range of Gam's punch, and after getting to the end, you can just continue onward. However, the designers made this power-up very visible, and because you've just seen the whole screen, you know what you need to do to get it. If you're smarter than me, you'll have killed these flowers with Gam and made it easy on yourself. After you've got the power-up, which raises your health cap, you can travel this passage using KO, pick up a health potion, and come out in a convenient spot for yet another power-up. With a pretty small amount of space, the player is shown exactly what the challenge is rewarded for taking on a bonus challenge, and is then further rewarded for understanding the mechanics by not having to backtrack on top of the more material rewards. The game doesn't stay quite this fleshed out, but even in the later levels, there's tons of opportunities to tackle the same obstacles with different characters, or straight up choose different paths. One thing I don't quite enjoy that I think cuts into this is the fact that once a character dies, they're dead until you revive them with a potion or game over. Potions can only be used by the character who picked them up, and each character can only have one at a time. If one of them dies and they didn't have a potion, they're out for a while. This also means that certain sections are borderline impossible if you lose certain characters, usually Gam or KO. Spoilers, I guess. At the end of the game, there's this section where you need to use Gam or Kirika to cross the spikes, then KO to fit through these gaps in the wall. If one of them dies, and I died a lot here, you just need to game over or you can't make it. This issue bleeds over into the boss encounters. A lot of the bosses are actually really fun, like this water spirit lady in the second stage, or this skeleton knight in the ice stage. Their patterns are straightforward enough that you can learn them, but there's an element of randomness and a pace you need to keep up with. The best boss encounters in the game follow this. Not all of them. This purple wizard has this attack pattern that Gam literally can't dodge, so if you're down to Gam, you're screwed. There is a pretty easy way to beat him with Kirika, but if she's dead, Gam is your main boss killer if you don't want it to take forever. That's not the worst thing in the world. The second phase against the dragon is a lot more frustrating. The dragon's attacks aren't so much the problem as the fact that touching him is instant death. Not all bosses have this, but near the end they start giving it to everyone, and he can lurch forward with no warning. Again, this isn't the end of the world, but having to redo an entire difficult level just to get back here and die again is frustrating. And that's really my only real complaint about the game. Some parts are just frustrating, where I feel like they don't need to be. It's not a problem that the bosses are hard, it's that failing them adds a lot of tedium to the experience, when the game actually plays quite well. Moving, shooting, climbing walls and ceilings, it's all really smooth. The only suggestions I would make are 1. Don't take characters out when they die, just restart from the checkpoint, and 2. Make bosses their own stages so you can just restart them if you game over. Maybe that's just my baby zoomer sensibilities, but that would have improved the experience a lot for me. The presentation in this game is great, I should mention. The sound effects are nice and crunchy, and the graphics are gorgeous. Very colorful, with detailed backgrounds and animations. Look at this wizard appearing and disappearing. It's great. Hell, look at Samson. When he jumps, he does this weird spin. Not sure what that's about, but it feels like a flex from the animators. The other characters have some nice subtle animations, like Gam blinking or Kirika flapping her wings, but their jumps are pretty standard. Why is it just Samson who they decided to draw frame by frame in a 360-degree rotation? Oh, wait, they did do that for the other characters. It's just not when they jump. These animations are used when they land on these rotating platforms. They appear in one section of one stage. This is the only time you see these. Why? The space taken up by the animations might explain why there's almost no stage themes. Yeah, the game has a decently sized track list, but Most of it are boss themes and very short songs played during scripted sequences. 90% of the game, you're going to be listening to the theme of the character you're currently playing. It helps that the music is pretty solid. Anything for better wizard animations, I guess. One game that does not have this problem is Cliffhanger from 1993. Cliffhanger. I don't know why I played this game. Out of all the licensed drivel that came out for the NES, this one made me look twice, probably because of this epic box art. Based on a forgotten Sylvester Stallone movie of the same name, Cliffhanger for NES is one of many adaptations that came out of its marketing campaign. Look at this title screen. Magnificent. The intro tells you everything you need to know. Terrorists try to steal money from a plane, get shot down, and make a mayday signal. Stallone's character, a rescue climber, heads out in response. This music is kinda really good. I like it a lot. The OST was actually adapted from the original film score, and you can hear where this game's composer, Mark Cooksey, took inspiration. Dear God, this game looks awful. It looks like it's running on a calculator that mouth breathes. The mountains are all cross-hatched, the tiles don't have transparency where they maybe should, and the whole screen has this weird, dull look, like there's a gray film over it. There was another version of this game for Game Boy, and it looks like they literally just took that one and colored it. This sprite doesn't exactly give me Stallone vibes, but then again, I don't know what would with such little space to work with. It's a platformer, because of course it is, and it's surprisingly not terrible. Jumping and attacking feel fine. Movement isn't too stiff. It's got the bases covered. The level design leaves a bit to be desired. The designers took a very slapdash approach to branching paths. It pretty much boils down to low ground is money but danger. High ground is safe but no money. There's some rope you can climb, enemies to fight off. It's okay. I can't get past the third screen. There's these falling rocks which are completely random, and there's no way to dodge them if you're on the ladder without falling all the way off, so you just have to pray you get lucky. When I reach the top of the screen, there's this jump that you can supposedly reach with a running start, but for the life of me, I can't. There's no run button or anything. I have no clue what I'm doing wrong. The only saving grace is when I noticed how complex the song here is. Actually quite a nice tension song. Supposedly, this game adapts the movie very closely, even including a deleted scene as a stage, but I'll never see it. No well. You know, with how snowy this game is, it really makes you appreciate the polar ice caps, which in turn makes you ponder their melting. Melting caused by global warming, a force which is fought against by none other than the greatest ecological superhero in the world, Zen the Intergalactic Ninja. Oh, what, you haven't heard of Zen? Zen the Intergalactic Ninja has a bizarre history that could honestly be its own video, if I were like a comic book channel. Zen was created in the late 80s by Steve Stern to cash in on the TMNT craze at the time. More than he was an artist, Stern was a salesman, and after making a few comics independently, he managed to get a publishing deal with Archie that he spun into all kinds of merchandise. Toys, cards, a bunch of weird shit. Chief among those was a video game, developed by Konami in 1993. This is one of the only NES games, or games in general, that I've seen with a sound test in the main menu. Curiously, it looks like there's only a few tracks in the game, and starting it up reveals that there are indeed 4 levels to choose from. Very Mega Man. Zen is an environmental superhero who fights the forces of Lord Contaminus. It's basically Captain Planet, but with a blue guy. A different blue guy. Let's pick the Toxic Factory stage first. The Blue Man group tells us that we need to escape the level before it explodes, and it begins with an actual in-game cutscene of Zen planting some bombs. This is a really small but nice touch in the presentation. The gameplay here is a little rocky. For the most part, the isometric perspective is fine for fighting off enemies, of which there aren't very many, but it starts to get very uncomfortable when platforming gets involved. I got really frustrated with this part in the second section, but I soon realized that jumping when the claw comes down will avoid it. On top of that, the little orange shadow is actually pretty good at telling you where you are. This jump sucks. The angle makes it so unclear that it's just barely above where you are. It's ultimately not the worst once you get used to Zen's floaty jump and to learn to position with his shadow. What is not cool is the section right after. You climb this ramp and fight off some enemies before coming to this hole that just says, in. I do what makes sense to me and walk over it, but I get pushed back by this tennis net. Why can't I go in? What the fuck do you mean in? Here's what you're supposed to do. Once the net arrives, you need to attack it to force it back far enough that you're standing over this hole. Then when the crusher comes down, Zen will be left hiding underneath. You do this 3 times, and then you can pass. I don't know why Zen can't just do this immediately. I don't know why he can't just jump over it. I don't know why. The game immediately puts you in a do-or-die situation with no time to react as lasers cut away the ramp. You just have to know that this is coming or you're screwed. This comes out of nowhere, will kill you, and never returns anywhere else in the game, by the way. You fight an alright boss right after. You need to jump to avoid the smoke clouds, then wail on him for a bit. Do that a few times and you What? Oh. I forgot about the countdown. Time to optimize. There's a cute little bonus stage where you knock garbage into a furnace, and then the next stage I choose is the forest. Let's see, the flowers are being killed by acid rain, keep them healthy by hitting them and fighting the boss at the same time? Okay. Okay, this is all scripted. Uh-huh. Bounce all the way up. Oh, uh-huh. Boss fight, we're in a boss fight. She's throwing test tubes really fast, gotta avoid those. I just realized we are now playing a 2D side-scroller. Okay. Go down? Okay, back to the tree. I just noticed this in the top left. This is the bar that keeps track of the flower's health. I'm just frantically searching for flowers to whack while avoiding the cloud enemies and also fighting the boss? In the span of 5 seconds, you are expected to grasp new 2D controls and perspective, a boss's attack patterns, a new enemy pattern that changes when you hit it, the new flower mechanic and the associated meter, new platforms that bounce you, and a new rail climbing mechanic. You need to give me some time. I figure out after a few attempts that you don't even need to manage the flowers. If you crouch down in front of the boss, you have enough invincibility frames to brute force through her health bar with the sheer power of mashing. Well, that was easy. What's this? Jeremy has been kidnapped? Oh, so there's a second half to this level where you need to scale a building and fight Lord Contaminus, who has captured your human friend Jeremy, a relatable child character who was added in the Archie series to boost their chances of getting a cartoon. So, how do I climb this thing? After some experimentation, I discovered that pressing towards a wall and hitting jump will do a wall jump. The boss here is actually quite easy. He doesn't do any contact damage, so you can just attack him without a lot of risk. With Lord Contaminus kept at bay, I choose the railway stage next. Looks like we're in a minecart. Maybe this will be an on-rails section? Can I jump? Switches? What are switches? Is that switches? I think that was switches. Time to bust out the list again of things this level expects you to grasp in seconds lest you die. New minecart controls, including jumps. You could have jumped here. Flipping switches by hitting them. The game doesn't say which side they're on, you just have to learn. In comparison to the forest, a much shorter list, but still a level that forces you into do-or-die scenarios with no explanation. Anyway, this stage has a number of splitting paths depending on which switches you decide to hit, but most of them end up in the same few challenges. Jump these rocks, dodge these rocks, jump these pits, fight these guys, attack these moving walls, except the flashing ones, which you have to jump over. It's weird. I'm glossing over a lot of this one, but it took me a while. There's a lot of health drains. If you don't know, you can just mash your way through them. After learning enough of the level to get by, I figured that I'd just let this final switch go by, as it wasn't that important which path I'd taken previously. I guess that's what the X meant. Taking the correct path this time, I finally arrive at the boss. This guy was a pain in the ass. The arena is so cramped that you either need to jump or attack his projectiles, but that's usually only enough to get through one or two of the 3 volleys he throws. You're practically required to damage boost through and spam him. I looked up this walkthrough, and I guess there's a way to stun lock him into taking a lot of consecutive hits, but I couldn't find it. His pattern is just throw projectiles, sometimes call barrels down, and sometimes go underground and try to grab you. This took me forever. But I finally did it. There's only one more stage to go. The oil rig. And it's okay. It's not nearly as frustrating as the others. I die a lot, but it felt less bullshit, because I wasn't just being thrown some shocking new mechanic and expected to learn it. Instead, there's a much subtler one introduced here where you need to pick up fire extinguishers around the level and use them to free firefighters trapped in burning rooms. It's a lot easier to wrap your head around, and it's presented in a way where the player doesn't immediately die if they don't understand it at first. How about that? The climbing mechanic returns, but again, introduced in a low-stress environment. I mean, there's fire raining down from above, but you know what I mean. The boss of this level was alright too. He has a pattern that tripped me up for a while, but once I learned it, the fight was a cinch. It actually felt pretty good to master. This is also the level where I learned what these things are. Zen can pick up these items that allow him to meditate, fully regaining his life. It is the only way to regain life in the game. This is important for later. Without a moment's hesitation, we're thrust into Cave Stage, yet another new gameplay type, this time maneuvering left and right while falling. If you land on one of the many platforms, you'll get stalled while the giant crusher drops ever closer. Much like the previous levels, this one is a series of trial and error gameplay where you just need to learn the layout and which spots to move to. Unlike most of the previous levels, it has no intro. It just kind of starts raw, which felt very disorienting, but okay. Right after that, you fight a boss in a lake of bones. It's kind of annoying, but you mainly have to work around the randomness of when he'll pop up. Just kill the frogs, avoid the water gun, and eventually you'll hit him enough times to win. Now for my least favorite part of the game. This boss, the junk drone, is a nightmare. It might seem really simple, but the way it moves, combined with the perspective, makes avoiding it and hitting it so awkward. Like, how do I hit you? I spent a good 25 minutes on this son of a bitch before I got him. Thank God I was using save states. Another boss fight ensues where you have to fight an evil clone of yourself. And this guy's crazy. He attacks so fast, I have no idea how I'm supposed to win out. The old 8 Eyes dance isn't the strategy, neither is the long pole attack. His version of your moves are just so much more rapid, he always outpaces you in damage. And once I actually get him low, he jumps into a pod and heals back all of his life. He does this twice in the whole fight. There's no way to stop him. I looked up a walkthrough and the guy just spams harder and uses a life refill when he gets low. This boss's design is so straightforward and dumb, you just have to rely on full life refills. So I went back and found another walkthrough, and the guy there does this. I didn't even know you could do this. There's so few opportunities to even learn about this move in the game. It's pretty much just the oil rig stage. It's the only one that's both 2D and has grounded enemies. Because I didn't know about this move, I used a little bit of American ingenuity. Because on an emulator, you can just bind a turbo button. This game breaks with the turbo button. Yeah, look at him, he can't do anything. What incredible gameplay, Konami. With that, you're whisked to the final boss, Lord Contaminus. He falls almost immediately to the might of the turbo button, and his second phase isn't that much harder. There is a time crunch where you need to kill him before the Earth is fully contaminated, but, turbo button. And at last, we reach the end. The birds fly, the flowers blow in the breeze, and Zen meditates on the battle won. I neglected to mention it, but this game is a real standout for its graphics. It is one of the best looking games on the system. Highly detailed tile sets that aren't overly busy, really pleasing color palettes, some impressive cutscenes that remind me of Ninja Gaiden, and some expressive animations for a few bosses. It's just a shame that the game is brought down so much by its design. I'll wrap it up like this. Little Samson is a good example of a post-standards game. Like, we've got standards for how a game should be now. It should handle well, have good visuals, good music, and some interesting mechanics that set it apart. It's held back by a few small annoyances, but the overall package is more than worth checking out. Cliffhanger is a novelty that's only really notable for the chasm between how bad it looks and how okay it plays. And the soundtrack, I guess. Also, I guess the faithfulness of adapting a movie that no one remembers or cares about. Zen the Intergalactic Ninja is a slog. It's the ultimate ideas game, where they had a bunch of ideas for cool gameplay sections and just shoved them all together with no care for how the player learns and gets comfortable. It becomes a non-stop slew of gimmicks that results in really cheap trial and error gameplay, where you're primarily trying to wrap your head around what's going on. That is, when the game isn't throwing frustrating nonsense at you like mash until you win. Zen as a character would go on to flounder. It turns out that while there was an audience of people who thought he was cool, Steve Stern ran into a problem that there just weren't enough people who cared about Zen. He basically got by pretending that the property was the next big thing, but when the sales data came in, everything kind of crumbled underneath him. He lost the Archie series, he lost the toy line, it just evaporated. Nowadays, he's desperately trying to make Zen a thing again, while running a company called Storyboard Graphic Novels. Can you believe the audacity to have a medical emergency while I'm recording? A comics studio who will take movie scripts and turn them into graphic novels. I'm serious. They're going to take a script for one medium, turn it into another, and hopefully you can use that to get some kind of traction for your script. Did I mention that they don't publish it for you? Oh, yeah, they'll make it contractually, but you're supposed to just pitch it to Marvel, DC, Image, whoever. You can also self-publish through Amazon. Did I mention that the fees can also run up to $30,000? Oh, but it's worth it because you're working with top-of-the-line, A-list name talent like Steven Stern. But also a guy who was an assistant to Rob Liefeld and a couple others who do freelance work. No shade to those artists, but they aren't really A-listers like Stern claims. What a company. What a man. What a disappointing game. Man, I don't feel like ending on a bad note. Lightning round time! Shatterhand is a badass action platformer from '91 where you punch robots and get little squares that make different little robot buddies depending on the combination. It's really simple and fun, it's hard, but the gameplay is so straightforward that it feels like you can master it. Also, it looks great. Check out this parallax scrolling. Wow. Metal Storm is another gem from '91. You're a robot who can jump, shoot, and flip gravity. The game is short and sweet. Every level almost turns into an action puzzle thing. It takes a very small set of mechanics and stretches it to the limit without feeling dragged out. Clash at Demon Head is like a precursor to Symphony of the Night type games. I'm not using Metroidvania, that's a bad term. It's another action platformer, but this time there's a big map and you get to choose which direction to go in after a level. You can collect money and buy upgrades on your way to beat the final boss. It's super non-linear and you need to explore a lot of the stages to advance. Fun fact, I knew about this game before my girlfriend forced me to watch Scott Pilgrim, because I'm so fucking hipster. Wait, Shatterhand is also referenced in that comic? Jesus. One more, Wario's Woods? Sure. Cool puzzle game. Birdo. Podcast. Patreon. Bye.
Here comes a daredevil! Game over!